What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Ghost Carolina Performance Podcast. Very excited today to have Eric Cressey on the podcast. Eric has done a lot in this game. If you guys don't know who he is, you should get out from under the rock. He is a lot of things to a lot of people. He's been a mentor to me over the past 12, 13 years that I've been doing this as a performance coach in the game. So I'm very excited to have Eric Cressey on the podcast today. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course, man. Of course. So for people that don't know about you, talk to us a little bit about your career, how it started, and then just kind of give us like a run through of kind of where you're at today.
Yeah, I think like many coaches, I was a fantastically mediocre athlete. A lot of the athletes like I talk to nowadays, like, man, if I had just had this training when I was back that age, I would have been this, that, or the other. I'm like, I would have been an average Division II athlete with good training in high schools. I was a tennis and soccer player. Had a bum shoulder, had some other health issues that kind of precluded me from pursuing those in college. Actually went to college thinking I was going to be an accountant, and just kind of fell in love with the performance realm as I got healthier and worked through some of this stuff. Transferred from Babson College, which is more of a business school. Did a double major in exercise science and sports management, and went to the University of Connecticut. Did my grad degree there, and really kind of fell in love with strength and conditioning, realized it was what I wanted to do. We had a great human performance lab, a lot of really cool studies in that realm, but also just, having access to some high level athletes. Really expected to leave the University of Connecticut to become a college basketball strength coach, and instead just opted to go to the private sector. And it just so happened some of the first guys I worked with in the private sector were baseball players. And really a couple high school kids, one on one state player of the year. They won a state championship. All of them went and played college baseball in that first kind of off-season crew. And basically my phone started ringing off the hook. In 2007, we started CSP up in Massachusetts. Kind of grew by leaps and bounds. In 2014, we opened the Florida location. So now it's two facilities in two different states with guys from all 30 organizations and bunch of college guys. We actually just had another draft with 262 athletes drafted since 2012, just because the number's fresh in my mind. So it's been a good run. And then obviously I do some writing, some consulting, podcasting myself just to fill the hours. And then at the end of 2019, I joined the Yankees as their director of player health and performance. So basically oversee strength and conditioning, nutrition, and a little bit of the massage therapy, underneath our umbrella.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I got to come up there and do the upper body mentorship stuff with you guys. I want to say that was 2014. All you guys up there. That was a fun time. I was a GA at St. John's. It was awesome to come hang out and learned a lot. And that really started to mold a lot of my thought process and how to train players and just the vernacular you use, the ability for you to connect with a young strength coach like me, and then watching you work with, Eric Schoenberg, Mike Reinold, and just how the entire staff up there clicked. It's funny, like Eric Yavarone was one of the
Yeah.
engineers up there, and I got to work with him with the Dodgers, and just so many people that I've met and worked with from even being at that mentorship with you. So
Yeah. Cool
it's
group of guys. I think back, Chris Holt was at some of those. He's a bullpen coach now. So a lot of
yeah,
really people that are in the mix on those events. I love those.
yeah, it was awesome. A lot of really cool people around. Talk to us a little bit about like I kind of just want to go through like the youth athletic development stuff and just kind of work our way from young population through high school, through college and professional baseball. We're kind of both in that realm now. Talk to me a little bit about like your thought process on youth development. Maybe let's talk about like the 10 to 13, like maybe the prepubescent side of things. What's your thought process is there training players?
Number one thing I always tell, like parents and kids at that age is just be curious. And it's right fresh in mind. I have twin daughters that are 10 and a half. And what's interesting, one of them is like all in on gymnastics, loves it. The other one just quit gymnastics 2 weeks ago. She'd had enough. She's trying volleyball now. Like really just hasn't kind of found her way. Like one of them is pasty white with blonde hair. The other one is like olive skin with brown hair. One's lefty, one's righty. One loves to read. One can't be, bothered to pick up a book. One is like a total rule follower. The other one's like a free spirit. They could not be more different. These two kids have they were in the womb together. Like they have had the 99.9% same life experience all the way through, and they came out totally different. So I always use it as an example to share with parents and young coaches and stuff. It's like you never want to compare kids. Like nothing matters. They all kind of develop at different rates. My 6-year-old daughter, she's gonna be our savage. Like she's grown up. She's got this huge leg kick when she plays t-ball. Like, she's the one to bank on. But big picture, I would just say at that age, like have fun with it. Our gymnastics daughter broke her arm falling off a swing set back in January. She was in her sling in here, kind of getting the weight training bug. So she, worked out twice, 3 times a week for 6 weeks, put an inch and a half on her vertical jump on the force plates. you kind of realize that all it is about is just giving them exposures to this rich proprioceptive environment. I'm doing a ton of different things. So, my own daughters, gymnastics, softball, like I said, some volleyball, they'll mix in wiffle ball, they'll come to the gym and they'll work out a little bit. Obviously they have PE in school as well. So we just try to give them opportunities to be exposed to a lot of different stimuli so they can figure out what's right for them. But, something Mike Boyle told me really stuck out in my brain. He was talking about his own son and daughter who both went to college to play sports. And he said the smartest thing we did with them was they averaged 2 lifts per week from age 11 on. So you do the math, like 7 years, basically 104 lifts a year. You're talking about coming up on 800 lifts over the course of like that youth model.
Wow.
And like 2 lifts a week doesn't seem like a lot, especially when maybe at like 11, maybe they do 1 week and they take a 2 week vacation. It's not a big deal. And then by the time they're 17, maybe they're doing 4 days a week or something like that. So it kind of evens out. Just the consistency it takes. Like you can't make up those lifts from 16 to 18. So if you get somebody who's curious about it in that 11 to 14 range, it makes such a huge difference. Funny, I'm doing the podcast here at the facility. We have a kid who just walked in. He's grown like a foot in the last 6 months, but he was like this. I mean, he's one of the most like just locked in like 12-year-olds you'll ever see at the facility. And now, like after 4 years, like just like he's put together, and you're like, this is what happens when you just show up. So that's the biggest takeaway. Be curious and keep showing up.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I couldn't agree more. We have a couple young kids that we're just really hammering like the isometric side of things and like the centration and just really
Yeah.
letting them see what it's like and really kind of meeting them where they're at. So that's awesome to hear that that's your
The
thought.
number one goal in youth sports is just to make sure they come back to play next season.
How can we
That's what
keep them interested? Yeah,
it's it.
that's awesome. As far as like kind of moving up to like the, I guess maybe 13 through 15 side of things, how would you look at a player? Like kind of walk me through your process and I guess like your entire staff, like when you have a middle school, early high school kid come in, what that looks like for you guys.
Yeah, I think it can be different, you know what I mean? Just because some of those kids have hit their growth spurt, and like you get that kid who's, 5'11" at age 13, like who shot up really quick. He can't touch his toes. He's like, basically the bones have stretched out much faster than the muscles and tendons can keep up. Like those are guys where on one hand, it's a great time to train power. Those guys are freaky elastic. They can run fast, they can jump high. Like, a lot of those guys, they wind up having, like legitimate muscle strains. They might have like, stress fractures, they'll pull off a chunk of their ischial tuberosity or something like that. You see Osgood-Schlatters, Seaver's disease. You see all these different things in those populations that grow too quickly. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have kids that are like loosey-goosey, the late bloomers who, have no, good stiffness to kind of hold them in place. So I think you have to treat them a little bit differently. And I think it actually works well. Traditionally, you get those like 10 to 12-year-olds, like they really do better in a little bit more of like a one-size-fits-all group program, like put some stuff on the dry erase board, make it fun, throw the med balls, have them compete, stuff like that. Versus like 13 to 15, maybe you get them on a twice-a-week program that's a little bit more individualized to work on some of their unique mobility deficits. Every once in a while you'll find a 15-year-old that's really fallen in love with the weight room and like you can start to do some cooler stuff with them. But for me, that 13 to 15 is, comprehensive compound exercises, just, not overloading guys, like making them very familiar with the techniques and really set the stage for doing the important stuff from 16 to 18.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on to that
Yeah.
other, talking about some of the like the whiteboard stuff, like for the parents and the younger kids listening, like what movement patterns would you say like that would be probably the best things for them to look at?
Yeah, I think the big ones, squinch, lunge slash split squat, push up, the push pull, vertical and horizontal are your big ones. All kinds of the core stuff, whether it's chops and lifts, basic prone and side bridging, foundational stuff, sled work. So you're building some work capacity and some movement competencies. Like learn how to lateral lunge, I think is actually really important in that population. We don't see a lot of athletes that actually do it really well, even when they come in at 17 or 18. Love throwing the heck out of the med ball. Just to give the guys a chance to compete a little bit, be athletic, and then obviously working on sprint progressions, jumps and landings, just overall movement competency stuff. And that, you can always get a lot done with just a quality like dynamic warm up on the front end.
Absolutely. For folks that don't really know what work capacity is and like whatever like general aerobic capacity is, like how important is that for you in all aspects and what does that look like for players?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time building a large aerobic base with a youth athlete for the most part. Obviously, if we're talking about like a cross country runner or something very, very different.
Yeah.
But in a baseball population, I think what happens is if you're meticulous with some just kind of minding rest intervals, not letting guys take 8 minutes between sets and just keeping them moving during their lift. They should build a fair amount of work capacity, but we're not spending a ton of time distance running or anything like that. And I think that's an important question. Big picture for me, work capacity is very skill specific. I always tell the story of Lance Armstrong. Like he retired as the greatest cyclist in the world and then went and did the New York Marathon like within the next year. And he said it was the hardest athletic event he ever did. So like just because you can run 5 miles and barely break a sweat doesn't mean that you're going to have great work capacity when it comes time to throw 90 pitches as a starting pitcher or get in the cage and do an hour of, hitting lessons with a group of three or something like that.
Percent. Yeah, couldn't agree more on that. But so since we're on that topic, like well, kind of the progression of the age aspect of things, what does it look like the high school kids, 16 to 18, I guess 19 now with kids starting to reclass and do a lot of those things? How does that look for you guys there?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. I'll tell you this, like if you walk in and see some of our 17, 18-year-olds, you wouldn't know that they aren't college athletes, right? Some of them actually blend in with our pro crowd pretty well. And we've got some pretty impressive like force plate and Proteus numbers to show that they actually put up some pretty big numbers at time. I think what you see historically is power is the differentiator. Like some of these strength and power metrics are what take you from high school to college. It's a relatively flat progression from college to pro sports on average. And don't get me wrong, you see some guys that take huge jumps in that world, but I think big picture, like you're trying to accelerate the development in those high school kids that they would get in their first year of college. I often joke my number one rule is like my goal is when I send a kid who's been with us in high school off to college, that strength coach should feel like he's an assistant coach on the floor with them, like that he has that much awareness on not just movement patterns, but like how to read a program, how to go about his business. Like that for me is a sign that we've done a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. That's outstanding, and I echo that. Like coming from a good program and like just being a college strength coach and working in professional baseball, it's very beneficial when you have somebody that's trained, with somebody like you and your staff and us here. Like just being able to have like that foundation, it makes all the difference in the world because you're one player with 34 now with the roster changes. Like it's hard to be in all those places at one time. That's
And I think it's the hardest job in the world because everybody's coming into a different position. Like in the big leagues, like you can onboard 70 big leaguers, major league spring training, like everybody's kind of done something or established some kind of routine. But if you're a college strength coach and 35 guys walk in on the first day and like some have never been in a weight room, some have never touched their toes, like it's hard compared to what you have with your guys who've been with you 4 years.
percent. It's an interesting world. What does it look like for you guys with the college guys and professional guys in the off season, and how does that differ maybe from like the high school? Like what I guess what advancement is that for you guys there?
Yeah, I think college and pro are very different. College because there's really not a set periodization schedule that you can really go through a lot of these guys because in the private sector, you get them for a month at, Christmas, sometimes only like 3 weeks, if I'm being honest.
Yeah,
And you also got a Christmas and New Year's mixed in the middle. Then you may have them for all summer. You may only have them for 6 weeks, depending on whether they play summer ball. And then sometimes you get them for like 3 or 4 days at Thanksgiving break. So it's a very fragmented year. I hate to say it, but the college guys that we see rolling in right now are more broken than I've ever seen before. And I think it has a lot to do with the ramp up shutdown, the very unpredictable nature of college sports, and the fact that so many guys are just changing programs so frequently. Like this summer, onboarding college guys, like it was like triage. The
yeah,
number of guys are like, yeah, I'm pretty good. And then they're like, oh, I had 2 wrist injections this season. Oh, I've had this back pain for the last 3 weeks, but I haven't had it checked out. You're seeing guys that are taking Toradol to get through a 60-game college season. That shouldn't happen. It's very eye-opening what's happening. There's a study that came out that they showed that Pac-12 injury rates were up 500% over the last 6 years or whatever it was. Like really eye-opening stuff. So I think there's some not great things happening in college baseball right now. I'm sure it's all college sports, just with some of the new stuff. Pro ball is very different. Like you might get a guy back, the second week in October after a long big league season. Minor leaguers come back usually a little bit sooner, and you've got, a really good chance to get some quality work in. I always say like a big leaguer who didn't make the postseason, you typically have a 19-week off season. And my goal is to get through 4 4-week blocks. So there's kind of 3 weeks in there that usually is like leaving from the end of the season or getting to spring training a little bit early. Maybe there's like a wedding or,
yeah,
some honeymoon in the middle, kind of that Christmas to New Year's break. Like, so usually the goal is to get in 16 good weeks of training with them. Obviously, guys go to the postseason. It's hard. You lose a month of your off season. So you have to kind of make it up on the back end just a little bit carefully during spring training. So, I think the big league side of it, or sorry, the pro baseball off season, you have a lot more time to do like a gradual on ramp, like build some work capacity, identify and address a lot of issues. get them to where they need to be, and then obviously add the skill specific work in a really like calculated manner. A lot harder to do that with college guys where it feels like just whack 'em.
Yeah, 100%. It really does. What do you think, in your opinion, like what has transpired besides obviously the NIL, the portal, and all these different things? Like why is college baseball in the situation that's in? Because I agree. Like I don't think it's not like it was even when I left East Carolina to go work with the Dodgers.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just injury rates and things like that. Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I always kind of crack up when I hear about a college program like bragging about their injury rates. Like, it's like you play 3 games on a weekend and 1 or 2 midweek. Like 5 games in 7 days is kind of nothing. Like it's less than minor leaguers play. It's way less than big leaguers play. And like there are a lot of hiccups in the schedule where you find breaks for guys. If you got a relief pitcher that's hanging, you skip a weekend and you've bought him a 15-day IL stint. You just can't do that in the big leagues. And so, for college injury rates to be skyrocketing that much with how kind of predictable the schedule it is, and like there's no real roster. Like you don't have to put somebody in an injured list. You just like, oh, he's sick or he's got a blister or something like that, and you buy him a week. That doesn't happen nearly as easily in pro ball, but I think it's very similar to what we're seeing in professional baseball. Is like if you go and you look at the data, from the MLB combine imaging, you look at like some of the stuff they've done on Latin American arms, like 8% of Latin American signees that report as asymptomatic have full thickness UCL tears. Like that's 2 out of every 25 guys. And those are just the ones we know about, right? So it's a very eye-opening time. So I think in general, there are more and more kids that have been broken early. Like everybody has osteophytes, calcification on the ligament, stress reactions, things that they don't even appreciate. So I think the amateur development model is incredibly broken. So when people ask me like, how do you fix this? Like you have to start at the younger levels. Like it's because some of the egregious violations of pitch counts and playing on multiple teams and stuff like that. It starts with parents and coaches that are actually willing to say no because kids get pulled in a lot of different directions. And at the same time, with social media and a lot of the resources that are out there are more opportunities to take very advanced training solutions to what you and I both know are very simple physiological needs, right? Like don't be a 50-pound goblet squat before you start throwing like weighted baseballs and high velocity. So it's a very broken model. It's going to be really hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube on this one.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. Let's talk a little bit about like some metrics. So we talked about like some of your high school guys that have some really good numbers comparatively to like the college guys and pro guys.
Yeah.
When you look at like those, I guess first question, when do you start looking at those numbers with kids and players? And then second fold, like what are some like baseline numbers where you look at, the force plate side of things, and what are some metrics that are really important to you?
Yeah, for what it's worth, everybody who comes into our facility jumps on the force plates or does a Proteus test at the same time. And honestly, I got it right here. This is on every office, shelf in our business is like these are the norms for professional, college, and high school guys on jump height, jump momentum, peak velocity, peak relative propulsive power, and then modified reactive strength index. So you can literally show what different percentile rankings are. And it's honestly, it's helpful in a discussion like this when a kid comes in with like, dad, and they're outlining the aggressive throwing program that they're going to get on, how they're going to learn sweeper and da 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 da. And then you show them like, hey, he just jumped a 2.5 peak velocity. Like, here's what my 11-year-old daughter does. Like, you're not far off. So I think males in general do very well with competition and comparisons. Females not so much. So we definitely don't use that nearly as much with our female demographics. But with men, like, hey, here's what the average professional baseball player does that comes in here. And we can also categorize it based on position players and pitchers. Obviously, peak velocity on your guys up the middle, your shortstops, your second baseman, your center fielders are going to be high versus they might be lower on like a catcher. But yeah, I think it's just great to have those quantifiable numbers to set some benchmarks that are expected of guys if they want to compete at the next level.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I mean, I've had the opportunity since I've been out for professional baseball to consult with some different colleges and things like that, and I see some similar things where you have movement quality issues like lack of range of motion, and then guys that do have the motion, to your point earlier, they don't have the proper stiffness to be able to control those ranges of motion. So it's a very glaring thing there that I think is so much overlooked. You guys look at like the coordination side of things. So like, look at coordination, strength, power, like twitch, like all these things. How do you guys add coordination and various things from the skill side of things to make sure that you're getting what you need?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really challenging thing I think we know when we see it that it doesn't look good, right? I mean, it's kind of
Yeah.
that 15-year-old kid that folds up like a lawn chair when he goes into a lunch pattern or something like that. But then you see them get on the mound, it actually looks a little bit better, like they can sequence it correctly. So I think that's where a lot of your marker list stuff comes in, like when you do have access to some of that stuff. We roll out Thea right now. We actually have a big renovation going on where we're going to add Qualysis, as well as swing catalyst force plates in the mounds. So just having the ability to like pull some objective data, which I think does to tend to help evaluate sequencing just a little bit better. But yeah, I think the coordination is a really hard thing to define. So I say, how, is he good proprioceptively? I'm like, I think so. Like he's a good athlete. Like he hasn't been broken, but you never really know until they do. So that's something that I don't think we've quantified particularly well. But I think you can hang your hat on it that they're getting better if you've given them exposure to a lot of different qualities. And I actually saw there was a study that literally just came out. I tweeted it out the other day that actually looked at it was dynamic balance in players of different levels of specialization, and high specialization teenagers had poorer dynamic balance scores than the medium and the low specialization athletes. So like kids who do a lot of different stuff generally get good at doing a wide variety of stuff.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. So kind of transitioning a little bit here towards the kind of like your path and like your career and stuff. How did you get hooked up with the Yankees and how did that all transpire? And I mean, I've known you for a long time, so I know how on it you are. How did you guys as a family decide like, hey, this is what we need to do, be in
Yeah.
multiple business and run the performance side for the New York Yankees?
Yeah, so I think, to be honest, some of my career path maybe was what led to it in a variety of ways. Obviously, we had exposures to baseball players, but opening the second facility in 2014 was really, really important for my professional development because it taught me a lot about scale. It's like you want to make sure that your clients are having a favorable experience and a similar experience in Massachusetts and in Florida. And you also, in doing that, we needed to build out a very synergistic team. Like I just didn't want to have a strength and conditioning facility. I wanted manual therapists. I wanted, physical therapists. I wanted pitching. I wanted hitting analysts, all that stuff underneath one roof where we could kind of deliver I guess, effectively a one-stop shop for athletes. So, knowing that we did it in two different places has, made me feel a lot better about what we could do. And I think we did it with a different way. Like we couldn't just go out and offer $250,000 to someone to be our pitching coach, right? But we found Matt Blake, in 2007, he had just finished up at Holy Cross and was like looking for something, huge growth mindset. We saw eye to eye on a lot of the way things worked. And he was a guy who was willing to grind, read every book on my shelf, pepper me with questions, and just like experiment. He was kind of at the forefront with some of the motion, or sorry, the like the Right View Pro software. Like nobody was using video back then. And so basically, we had to build it from the ground up. So I think we've had a good track record of developing coaches from within. They're all over baseball now doing cool stuff in the pro and college ranks. But, I think where the Yankee thing kind of came about is I had the opportunity. I consulted for the Minnesota Twins for 18 and 19. It was really more in the space of like staffing and, being available for kind of roster decisions, trade stuff, amateur draft, that side of things. And Derek Falvey was a really good mentor. He's still with the Twins and is a good friend. And he gave me a chance to kind of dip my foot in the shallow end of, hey, is professional baseball something that's for me? And I really enjoyed it. I'd been with Team USA for the 18 international team in 2015 as well. So it was cool to be, actively involved with like winning a gold medal and being part of that culture. I knew that it was something that intrigued me. So, the Yankees actually found me, towards the end of 2019. It was interesting because they were also looking at Matt Blake, who at the time had just been promoted to director of pitching for the Cleveland Indians, now Guardians at the time. So it was interesting, like just, kind of those things happen a little bit in parallel. And so it's been a good challenge. I'm in my sixth year and I've really enjoyed it. I think in the private sector, when you own your own business, my name's on the wall. Like I'm kind of always expected to have the last answer and make the tough decisions. I think in pro baseball, there's more opportunities for me to like seek out opportunities to be the dumbest guy in the room and ask questions. And we obviously have some amazing people and amazing resources with the Yankees. But you want to feel like you're contributing in various ways. Especially a lot of things behind the scenes that like the casual fan might not appreciate is actually happening. It's also just, I think it's born out of the fact that like I understood scale, and what allowed us to scale from one to two facilities. There are a lot of the same principles that allow us to have, not just New York, but Scranton, Somerset, Hudson Valley, Tampa, our FCL team, our Dominican Academy. So it teaches you a lot about the kind of people you hire, how you invest in them, what systems, what kind of documentation you want in place to make sure that there's a consistent level of experiences for your athletes across a lot of levels.
Yeah. That's a great answer. Matt Blake is, somebody that I've stayed in contact with since your place and being able to, meet up with him with over here at the Wake Forest seminars that they do at the Bridge Seminar and just
Yeah.
hang out and talk to him. If you didn't know who he was, you'd have no idea. He's a major league strength coach for the New York Yankees.
Yeah.
he's very gracious with his time and just his knowledge base, and it's been really cool to develop a friendship with him and kind of use him as a mentor, similar to the way I've talked with you and things like that over the years. Another really cool thing that you just mentioned, like USA in 15, like I don't know if you remember this, but I was with the collegiate national team and walking past you at the complex,
That's
it's like Eric, what's up, man? Like, it was
yeah.
super cool, like to see. It was cool to see. I had no idea you were going to be there. We were walking and doing something and passed by you guys, and y'all went and won the gold medal. It was a pretty cool time. Yeah, I'm just kind of reminiscent about kind of like how my career is kind of like crossed with yours a little bit. It's been a little bit of the opposite. So like I was in college baseball, and obviously you weren't in college, but being able to go from college baseball to my stint with the in the minor leagues with the Dodgers to now being on the private sector side. I remember you talk about scale. I remember watching you and how things were going in Massachusetts and the way you guys did things. It was very systematic. I want to say I think Pete had a I think he had like a little talk after one of the things
Yeah.
with some of the upper
Yep.
body mentorship, just talking about business. And I mean, shit, I was a graduate assistant. I think I was 25 years old. I just got married. I had no interest in owning a business. I was like in college or professional baseball, or whatever the case may be. But I remember sitting there and just listening to the way you and him talked about your business and how you guys developed it, and just the open communication and the very clear defined roles. So that I've used some of that. So thank you for that. And it's been a really fun time. We're almost 2 years into this facility thing here. So it's an interesting thing, as you know, and I'm grateful for you for from years ago to be able to listen to some of that stuff.
And I think I appreciate you saying that. We always, I think when you see something in like a seminar format like that, like it's very calculated, it's very organized in our thoughts. Like, there are days like every other business when we're playing whack-a-mole, it's like the duck that's like perfectly still above water and then paddling like crazy underneath just because you get surprised a lot. But I think
Yeah.
the longer you've been at it, it's not that the surprises stop coming, it's that you don't get as high and low. Like we had back in 2017 when Kluber and Scherzer both won the Cy Young that night, like I mean, the announcement was on TV or something like that, and I was like an hour later, I was like writing a program for like a 15-year-old or something like that. And my wife was like, "You're not even gonna like celebrate." I was like, "No." And it's funny because I don't know if you saw the whole interview that Scotty Scheffler just did. He's like, if golf doesn't fulfill you, all this stuff. I'm like, man, that was kind of hit home for me a little bit. Like, I love what I do, but I think ultimately like you enjoy like the challenges of like solving problems and you enjoy helping people, feeling like you were part of their process to get it to where they need. But like, it's very like, interesting where like, you hear about guys who like, win championships and like, oh, the ring just goes in the drawer and then we go on to the next season.
100%. It's really cool, like the fulfilling side of things. I was talking with, a high school kid who, just went in the first round from here, trains with us here, Josh Hammond. And just talking with him, he got drafted on Sunday and he's like, hey, he's going with Kansas City. He's flying out tomorrow. And he was like looking around the facility today and he's like, all right, all right. And I'm like, yeah, you don't really know what to do with yourself, do you, buddy? And he's like, not really. And it's one of those things where it's like, you don't get to enjoy it. Now he's on to that and it's on to the next thing. So I think that's just a byproduct of the world that we live in. But that's what drew me to training baseball players as well, is exactly what you said, being able to look at the movement quality and understand what it is that they need to access or not access in order to do their jobs, and then just helping people, making relationships and making sure that they understand that we're here for them and that we have their back. That's what it's all about for me,
Sure.
which is pretty cool. It's here similar to you as well. What would you say is maybe one of the most we talked a little bit about like behind the curtains from like a professional baseball side of things. What would you say is some of the most rewarding experiences for you working with the Yankees so far?
Man, I mean, it goes in a lot of different directions. I think anytime you feel like you've been able to turn a culture in a direction, I think that's way beyond just me. I think it's a lot of the people that we brought in, some of the amazing people that were there. We came in just trying to steer the ship in the direction that we wanted to. I think it takes several years to do that. So I think you maybe embrace it on the back end just because of how long it took. Year one, you kind of have to really evaluate what's there. It may mean, moving on from some people, but it also means that you're bringing in some great people. And then year two, it's like you see how all of the people who were there before and all the new people kind of peacefully coalesce, can work together. And you realize that when you get the right kind of people in the room, like they do some awesome stuff. And then year three was when everything was just like, wow, things are clicking. 2022 went all the way to the ALCS, and just seeing like the change in what the day to day looked like over the course of time was a really cool thing. Also, man, I love just some of the people we've developed, people who have just taken big step forwards. Like, I saw Matt Rutledge, who was our assistant strength coach at the major league level that we hired right when I came in. He's now basically running the show with the Mariners. So he was just at Yankee Stadium. We caught up a little bit. So it's always awesome to see people who, similar to Yavroni, who heck beat me for a World Series ring last year. Like, see those guys doing well out in the world. We see them in the NBA, we see them in the NHL, all over different spots from our internship room. So I really enjoy teaching and that side of things. But no, I think what still is something I'm super, I really really enjoy is the amateur side, like development. But so like for me, one of the high priorities, in my time with the Yankees was not just being involved on player development, but being involved on amateur scouting. So obviously, draft just wrapped up earlier this week, so like making sure we have an organization where there's a really uh, regular involved dialogue between scouting and player development. So I have a huge role with respect to amateur scouting and like trying to find the guys that we know you can develop. And it's kind of exciting. We're really, our first draft was 2020. We only had 3 picks. So it was kind of a little bit of a weird draft, especially because you're flying blind. We drafted Austin Wells, has been a great catcher for us. But 2021, we had several guys, Will Warren, Ben Rice, who are guys who were later round picks who are now impacting our major league rosters. I think that's the stuff that's really exciting. Guys that we identify in the draft. Hey, we can really, really help this guy for this reason or that reason. And then seeing them kind of surge through the system. I think that stuff gets me really, really excited. It's something that it's cool because you realize you're not just following the major league game every night. Obviously, that's how success is measured. But when you're watching kids do great things on the minor league side of things every night too, it's a very exciting time. So I enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's what it's all about is day after day, stacking days. It goes back to
Yeah,
what you talked about earlier, like not celebrating
yeah,
having 2 Cy Young winners
yeah,
in the
yeah.
same year, which is pretty remarkable. I guess what do you look for? Maybe this is for the young strength coaches or just performance coaches in general across all aspects of things. What do you look for when you're hiring coaches, and how do you know that they're the right fit for either your organization with your business or with the Yankees?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is I know that we could teach people what they need to know to be successful as long as there's a work ethic, there's a growth mindset, all that. Maybe the best answer is what are the biggest red flags? People complain like about anything, if I'm being honest. Like, it was oh my gosh, the woman from Shark Tank, not Lori, but Barbara Corcoran.
Yeah,
She had a quote. She basically said, complainers are thieves. They're like, they steal time. I just complain about anything. It's not part of my day. So I try to move on from that side of things as quickly as we possibly can. So just in general, you don't have to be crazy, upbeat, positive all the time, but you can't be like negative all the time. I think that's especially important if I'm being honest and working for the Yankees. Like there's some people who are not cut out for New York, right? Similar to Philly or Boston. Like it's a hard fan base at times. They want to win, they expect to win, and they deserve to win, right? The media can be really, really tough. So if you have someone who's constantly negative in that world, like no, the players don't need more of that negativity. So you have to be, you have to stay neutral. So I think that's really, really important. I think it's also concerning when people kind of skip steps. They want to really delve into super advanced concepts before they've built like a really strong foundation of general capabilities that set the stage for doing cool stuff. I think that's something without really even knowing. Like I kind of didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in this field. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do like research in biomechanics or exercise endocrinology or be a strength coach or be a trainer, go to physical therapy school, all that stuff. So I tried a lot of different stuff and tried to become a little bit more well-rounded. And then the time came to like, hey, baseball, elbows, shoulders, necks, like it kind of found me and I was, I think, well positioned to handle it. So I think have a growth mindset, don't complain. The advice I always give to people too, if you're trying to like fast track your careers, figure out what your boss hates to do and do it incredibly well. Just like take it on, do it well consistently over and over and over again. And that's immediately how they perceive value, and sometimes you might not have like a lot of high level value that you can bring to the situation. But what I mean, if you can have some spring in your step, you can interact with a lot of people. Like, for me, like on a busy day, we might see a couple hundred people in here. Like I can't physically have interaction with every client every day. But if I know that I have good people that really care, who are going to go out of their way to, fist bump that 14-year-old and ask him how his game was this weekend, that makes me feel really good about the kind of people that we have, on staff. So, that's a little bit of a brain dump on it, but hopefully.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. I think that makes a lot of sense. One question that I personally have is how do you separate your business with the Yankees? Because obviously you have players at all levels that train with your facility. Like, how does that work for you guys, and how do you keep that? the way it should be, I guess.
Yeah, I joke about this. A long time ago, there was an article. It was Randy Zuckerberg, I think it's Mark's sister. She said, family, friends, fitness, sleep, and career. Pick three. So obviously family, like I'm pretty good about fitness. Like I'm kind of a miserable guy to be around if I don't work out. Career obviously is part of that. So then you're left with basically sleep and family. I'm a horrific sleeper. I'm not proud of it. It's something I constantly have to work on, but I'm that guy that I fall asleep the second my head hits the pillow, and I wake up at like 1:30 in the morning, just staring off into blackness, thinking of everything I need to do. So I'm working on that. But friends are an interesting one. Most of my friends come through work. Like we don't have a lot of like really close family friends that are just like people we met at school and things like that. Like we go on vacations with, Steve Cishek, who was a 13-year big leaguer. His wife and my wife are tight, and we both have three daughters. And he trained with us through his entire career. They live, 5 houses away from us. So like most of the time, like our friendships are in some way born through the gym, or just family day with the Yankees and stuff like that. So I think I kind of get 3.5. I cheat the system just a little bit. Big picture though, big takeaways for like how do I make it all work? One, be all in with what you're doing. Like if I try to do both at the same time, it doesn't work. So when I go to New York, they're 18-hour days, and that's all I do, right? When I'm here and I have 7 evaluations, I do them. And maybe the Yankees are stuff I'm taking care of between 5 and 7:30 a.m., or I'm doing it after the daughters are in bed and stuff like that. So I think the average person doesn't realize how much they waste time. How many times they just get baited into watching 2 hours of YouTube clips and stuff like that. I used to spend time at like grad school, like arguing on strength and conditioning forums and
Yeah.
stuff. Now, like, I don't listen to the radio in the car. I'm always listening to podcasts or audiobooks. But the year just has to be really meticulously scheduled. And I think most people would realize they can do a lot more stuff. And then at the end of the day, it's also like it's about finding like a little bit of quiet time just to have, a chance to be alone with your thoughts to work through things. So just always staring at a computer, always staring at a book, or always having human interaction. I think those are where I've probably had my most success with some of the staffing things that we've done, trying to find the right person and stuff like that. So I also stepped away from, pretty like established like speaking career. I do like one Perform Better talk a year. And I might do one in the off season. Kind of coincided with COVID where you could do a lot more of that stuff remotely. But there was a period where I was doing 8 to 10 weekends a year going on the road to give courses. And I stepped away from that and plugged it in with Yankee stuff. And it's been a good decision.
Good for you. Yeah, that's awesome. I remember that. It was a lot going on. Like this dude's all over the place. I think that's awesome. Is there any advice that you would give maybe to we kind of I like to end these with like advice for the high school kid, college kid looking for like in the portal, kind of figuring out what they want to do, and then the last one maybe parents how they should handle certain situations.
Yeah, I think for the high school kid, this is a level of like maybe directness that I think a lot of kids need that day. And nowadays, it's like they just don't realize how good players are at the next level. Everyone talks about grinding and how hard they're working and stuff like that. And it's why I like to have some quantifiable numbers, but like everybody thinks they're the best, shortstop in the history of their town. I'm like, there's probably 10 more in your state that are better than you. And those guys aren't even the best players in the country. And then you have all of Latin America, Australian baseball is taking off. We're seeing more and more Canadian players. Like there's just so much talent out there. So it's, if you look at the Yankees roster, you kind of need to be an all-star to break our lineup in some capacity. So I think, in that world, like I just always tell guys, it's not to belittle them or the work they put in like that. It's just it tells them not to be comfortable because there's always someone out there that's working harder. I remember Bill Hartman joked like back in the days, like no matter how strong you are, there's a 120-pound Chinese girl who's warming up with your Mac somewhere. So just like
100%.
keep practicing, keep putting in the work and all that stuff. And I think a lot of people really talk a big game, but they don't necessarily back it up with the work. With that said, the cheat codes are sleep and nutrition. Like if kids would understand what a huge difference it can be just to take care of your dietary intake and your sleep quality at a young age, it's a magnifier of all the work that you put in. I always talk to players in the big leagues, the 5 things that make you successful: have a great off season, have an elite daily prep routine, eat well, sleep well, and don't waste bullets in the wrong places, right? Don't be that guy that hits in the cages till your hands bleed every day and then goes out and pulls an oblique in your first at bat because you're exhausted, right? So if you do those 5 things, you're in a great spot. Parents is a little different. Parents, be comfortable saying no. Your kids can't be everything to everybody all the time. That's one of the reasons why we're in the injury, kind of challenges that we have right now. It's because frankly, we've asked our kids to go to every showcase, throw for every scout, play for two teams at once. I'd rather see kids participate in multiple sports, get involved in a good strength and conditioning program, and let the baseball kind of take care of itself as time goes on.
Yeah, that's spot on. Couldn't agree more. Well, Eric, I know you're super busy and I know you got to get rolling, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up right here. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed it. It's an honor to have you on. Of
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me and keep up the great work. All right.
course. Thanks, Eric.